In the steamy jungles of the Pacific, between 1942 and 1945, one American weapon transformed warfare: the flamethrower. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, the Marines unleashed an inferno that left Japanese soldiers paralyzed with terror. Welcome to Japanese Soldiers Were Shocked by America's Flamethrowers in the Pacific, an audiobook that immerses you in the heart of the Pacific War, where fire scorched not only the jungle but also the morale of an enemy who thought they were prepared for anything. Prepare for a journey of flames, bravery, and the human cost of a weapon that redefined fear. In 1942, the Pacific War was a brutal battle. Japanese soldiers, entrenched in bunkers and caves, resisted with fierce discipline. But on Guadalcanal, a new sound broke the silence: the roar of the M2-2 flamethrower. With a range of 20 meters and fuel burning at 1,200 degrees Celsius, it incinerated enemy positions in seconds. The Marines, advancing in the rain, watched their enemies flee or perish in flames. One Japanese soldier wrote, "Fire falls from the sky like a demon." This book explores that impact, a moment when terror changed the battlefield. The flamethrower didn't just destroy, it paralyzed. On Iwo Jima, the Japanese, hiding in tunnels, faced an invisible enemy: the fire that invaded their shelters. Captured diaries reveal their panic. There is no escape from the American hell. While the Marines risked their lives carrying napalm tanks, the Japanese, trained in hand-to-hand combat, found themselves defenseless. This audiobook captures that shock, a contrast between Japanese bravery and the scorching power of the Allies. American ingenuity was key. In Hawaii and California, engineers perfected the M2-2 and M9, creating weapons that mixed gasoline and napalm for a sticky, relentless fire. In 1944, flamethrowers mounted on Sherman tanks brought hell to Okinawa, incinerating entire fortifications. One engineer recounts, "We designed fear itself." This book reveals the secrets of that technology, a triumph of science that left the Japanese speechless. The psychological impact was devastating. Japanese soldiers, steeped in Bushido honor, preferred suicide to being burned alive. On Peleliu, Marines saw enemies emerge from caves with wet towels, only to be consumed by fire. One Japanese officer wrote, "The roar of the flamethrower is the end of the world." This audiobook explores that terror, a weapon that destroyed not only bodies but souls. Marines carrying flamethrowers were heroes and martyrs. With 70 pounds of equipment, they were easy targets for snipers. On Okinawa, a flamethrower operator saved his platoon but died under enemy fire. One Marine recounts, "Every shot was a sacrifice." This book honors their courage, a testament to men who endured hell to save their comrades. The contrast with the Japanese was stark. While Japan relied on bunkers and defensive tactics, the Americans relied on fire, a weapon they could not counter. In 1945, flamethrowers sank 30% of Japanese fortifications in the Pacific. A Japanese commander laments, "We can't fight fire." This audiobook explores that disparity, a moment where innovation triumphed over tradition. The legacy of the flamethrower is complex. After the war, it marked the veterans who used it and those who faced it. In museums, the M2-2 rests as a reminder of the brutality of war. One veteran writes, "The fire still burns in my dreams." This book reflects on that cost, a weapon that won battles but left indelible scars. Why does this story matter? Because the flamethrower didn't just burn jungles. It burned illusions, proving that technology and courage could overcome any defense. Japanese soldiers in their diaries, and Marines in their memoirs, remind us of the price of war. Subscribe, ring the bell, and join this journey across the Pacific, where fire changed history. Let's begin with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Fire descends from heaven. In August 1942, the jungle of Guadalcanal was an unforgiving battlefield. U.S. Marines, exhausted by heat and mosquitoes, advanced through vines, facing an invisible enemy. Japanese soldiers entrenched in hidden bunkers. But a new weapon broke the silence. The M2-2 flamethrower, a 70-pound device that sprayed fire 20 meters. When the flames lit up the jungle, burning fortifications and forcing the Japanese to flee, combat changed forever. This chapter takes you to the flamethrower's debut, a moment that redefined fear in the Pacific. Guadalcanal was the first major land engagement in the Pacific. The Japanese, with 30,000 troops, defended the island with bunkers camouflaged under roots and mud. The outnumbered Marines struggled to advance. In September 1942, the M2-2 went into action. With a tank of gasoline and compressed nitrogen, it shot fire at 1,200 degrees Celsius, incinerating positions in seconds. One Marine recounts, "Fire was a god in the jungle." This chapter captures that impact, a weapon that surprised both sides. The Japanese were unprepared. Trained in bayonet combat, their bunkers resisted bullets, but not fire. At the Battle of Tenaru, a Marine platoon used flamethrowers to clear 3 bunkers, killing 50 of the enemy. One captured Japanese soldier wrote, "Fire fell from the sky, we couldn't breathe." This surprise, combined with the roar of the M2-2, sowed panic. This chapter explores that shock, a moment where fire conquered steel. The M2-2 was a crude but effective weapon. Designed by the Army Chemical Corps, it used gasoline to create a fiery jet that burned for 9 seconds. On Guadalcanal, Marines carried it on foot, facing snipers. One operator recounts, "Every shot was a mortal risk." This bravery, under the weight of 70 pounds, allowed the Allies to advance where rifles failed. This chapter honors their courage, a pillar of victory. The Japanese attempted to counterattack, using grenades and suicide charges. But the flamethrower, operated from 20 meters, was unreachable. On Edson's Ridge, an M2-2 incinerated a machine gun nest, saving a platoon. A Japanese officer writes, "The fire follows us like a demon." This helplessness in the face of an unknown weapon marked the beginning of their fear. This chapter captures that desperation, a contrast to the initial Japanese confidence. Marine training was rigorous. At Camp Pendleton, they practiced with M2-2s under simulated fire, learning to fire in short bursts. By 1942, 1,000 operators were ready, each capable of incinerating a bunker in minutes. One instructor recounts, "We taught them to master fire." This chapter honors their discipline, a factor that gave birth to the flamethrower. Allied logistics were key. On Guadalcanal, Liberty ships carried fuel tanks for the M2-2s. In 1942, 500 flamethrowers were deployed, with 10,000 gallons of gasoline. One logistics officer writes, "We kept hell burning." This network, in contrast to limited Japanese supplies, ensured the weapon's constant use. This chapter celebrates that effort, a logistical pillar. The Japanese underestimated the flamethrower. Their tactics, based on bunkers and trenches, were perfect for the M2-2. In 1942, they lost 1,000 men on Guadalcanal to flamethrowers. One Japanese commander writes, "We did not anticipate this hell." This blindness, born of confidence, left them vulnerable. This chapter explores that arrogance, a prelude to terror. The Marines quickly adapted the flamethrower. In the jungle, they used it to burn vegetation, exposing enemy positions. At the Battle of the Matanacaw, an M2-2 cleared a path, allowing an advance. One Marine writes, "Fire was our path." This adaptability, combined with bravery, surprised the Japanese. This chapter honors that tactical innovation. The psychological impact was immense. Japanese soldiers, facing flames, lost their Bushido discipline. On Guadalcanal, some abandoned bunkers, only to be cut down. One Japanese survivor writes, "Fire burns the soul." This fear, amplified by the roar of the M2-2, eroded Japanese morale. This chapter captures that rupture, a sign of the flamethrowers' power. Flamethrower operators were vulnerable. With fuel tanks on their backs, they were easy targets. On Guadalcanal, 50 operators died, but they saved hundreds. One Marine recounts, "We carried death to save lives." This chapter honors their sacrifice, a testament to humanity in war. The Japanese tried to adapt, using wet towels and deep caves. But the M2-2, with its sticky fire, overran them. At Alligator Creek, a flamethrower incinerated a bunker, killing 30 enemy. A Japanese officer writes, "There is no shelter." This chapter explores that helplessness, a contrast to Allied innovation. The Marines' morale grew with the flamethrower. Seeing burning bunkers gave them confidence. In 1942, a platoon used M2-2s to capture a hill, earning medals. One Marine writes, "Fire was our sword." This chapter celebrates that spark, an engine of victory. The Japanese, confident in their defenses, failed to anticipate the fire. Their bunkers, made of logs, were vulnerable. In 1942, they lost 10 key positions to flamethrowers. A Japanese soldier writes, "The fire betrayed us." This chapter captures that betrayal, a sign of Japanese decline. Fuel logistics were a triumph. On Guadalcanal, 50 ships carried 20,000 gallons of gasoline. One sailor writes, "We were bringing hell to the Pacific." This network, in contrast to Japanese shortages, ensured the M22's impact. This chapter honors that effort. The Marines innovated under pressure. In the jungle, they used flamethrowers for signals, burning patterns visible to aircraft. One officer writes, "The fire spoke for us." This creativity, combined with bravery, amazed the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that innovation. The Japanese, in their diaries, described the flamethrower as a demon. On Guadalcanal, 1,000 soldiers died from fire. One officer writes, "The roar of the fire is the end." This chapter captures that terror, a weapon that broke the Japanese will. Allied collaboration was key. Engineers and Marines worked together, perfecting tactics. In 1942, 100 instructors trained 1,000 operators. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to the fire." This chapter celebrates that synergy, a factor in victory. The flamethrower's impact was universal. Civilians on the islands, seeing burning bunkers, both feared and respected the Marines. One islander writes, "Fire was an American god." This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that marked everyone. Chapter 2, The Jungle as Hell. In 1944 and 1945, the battles of Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa brought the Pacific War to its most brutal point. The Japanese, entrenched in bunkers and caves, withstood aerial bombardment and artillery fire. But the U.S. Marines, armed with M2-2 flamethrowers and versions mounted on M4 Sherman tanks, transformed the jungle into an inferno. With flames reaching 40 meters and burning at 1,200 degrees Celsius, they incinerated entire fortifications, leaving Japanese soldiers trapped in absolute terror. This chapter takes you to the heart of these battles, where fire became the ultimate weapon against an invisible enemy. On Peleliu, in September 1944, the Japanese were defending 500 caves connected by tunnel. The Marines, facing machine gun fire, used the M2-2 to clear positions. A single flamethrower incinerated a bunker, killing 30 enemy personnel. One Marine recounts, "The fire turned the jungle to ash." This tactic, combined with the courage of the operators, enabled breakthroughs where rifles failed. This chapter captures that intensity, a moment where the flamethrower changed combat. On Iwo Jima in February 1945, the Japanese built 1,500 underground bunkers. The Marines adapted the M2-2 to M4 Sherman tanks, creating the Zippo tanks. These tanks fired napalm at 50 meters, incinerating entire caves. On Suribachi Hill, a Zippo tank destroyed 10 positions in one day. A Japanese officer writes, "The fire buries us alive." This chapter explores this lethality, a contrast to the static Japanese defenses. In Okinawa, April 1945, the Japanese used 60,000 troops in deep tunnels. The Marines, with M2-2S and Zippo tanks, burned 2,000 fortifications. One operator recounts, "Every shot was a controlled inferno." The fire, combined with napalm, stuck to the walls, consuming oxygen. The Japanese, suffocating, emerged only to die. This chapter honors that brutality, a weapon that forced surrender. Zippo tanks were a tactical breakthrough. Carrying 400 gallons of napalm, they could fire for minutes, covering areas of 100 meters. On Okinawa, a Zippo tank incinerated an underground barracks, killing 100 enemies. One Marine writes, "The tank was a dragon." This innovation, combined with the Sherman's mobility, amazed the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that ingenuity, a pillar of victory. The Japanese attempted to counterattack, using mines and snipers, but the flamethrowers, operated from tanks, were unstoppable. On Peleliu, a Zippo tank survived a suicide attack, incinerating the attackers. A Japanese officer writes, "We can't stop the fire." This helplessness in the face of napalm shattered their morale. This chapter explores that desperation, a sign of Japanese decline. Flamethrower operators were vulnerable. On Iwo Jima, 100 operators were killed by snipers. With 70 pounds of equipment, they could barely move. One Marine recounts, "We carried death on our backs." This sacrifice under constant fire enabled crucial advances. This chapter honors their courage, a testament to bravery. Allied logistics was a triumph. In Okinawa, 50 ships carried 20,000 gallons of napalm. Mobile workshops reloaded M2-2S in hours. A logistics officer writes, "We kept the fire going." This network, in contrast to Japanese shortages, ensured the constant use of the flamethrower. This chapter celebrates that logistical effort. The Japanese, confident in their caves, underestimated fire. On Iwo Jima, they lost 10,000 men to flamethrowers. A Japanese soldier writes, "The fire betrayed us." This blindness, born of confidence in their defenses, left them vulnerable. This chapter explores that arrogance, a prelude to collapse. The Marines adapted tactics. On Peleliu, they used M2-2S to burn vegetation, exposing bunkers. One officer writes, "The fire cleared the way." This creativity, combined with courage, enabled rapid advances. This chapter honors that tactical innovation. The psychological impact was devastating. In Okinawa, Japanese trapped in tunnels screamed at the sight of the flames. One survivor writes, "Fire burns the mind." This terror, amplified by the roar of napalm, shattered Japanese discipline. This chapter captures that rupture, a sign of the flamethrower's power. Zippo tanks changed the war. On Iwo Jima, they destroyed 500 bunkers, enabling the capture of Suribachi. One Marine writes, "The tank was our god." This lethality, combined with mobility, surprised the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that technology, a key factor. The Japanese tried to adapt, using water to extinguish the napalm. But the sticky fire continued to burn. In Okinawa, 2,000 soldiers were killed by flamethrowers. One officer writes, "There is no escape." This chapter explores that helplessness, a contrast to Allied innovation. The Marines' morale grew. Seeing burning bunkers gave them confidence. On Peleliu, a platoon used M2-2S to capture a hill, earning medals. One Marine writes, "Fire was our strength." This chapter celebrates that spark, an engine of victory. Flamethrower operators innovated under pressure. On Iwo Jima, they used short bursts to save fuel. One operator writes, "We controlled the hell." This creativity under enemy fire maximized the impact of the M2-2. This chapter honors that courage. Napalm logistics were key. In 1945, 100 ships carried 50,000 gallons to Okinawa. One sailor writes, "We were bringing hell to the Pacific." This network ensured a constant supply, contrasting with Japanese shortages. This chapter celebrates that effort. The Japanese, in their diaries, described the flamethrower as a demon. In Okinawa, 5,000 died from the fire. One soldier writes, "The roar of the fire is the end." This chapter captures that terror, a weapon that broke the Japanese will. Collaboration between Marines and engineers was vital. In 1944, 200 instructors trained 2,000 operators. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to the fire." This synergy ensured the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that unity. The flamethrower's impact was universal. Islanders, seeing burning bunkers, feared the Marines. One native writes, "Fire was an American god." This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that left its mark on everyone. Chapter 3. The Invisible Fear. Deep in the depths of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japanese soldiers faced a new terror: the American flamethrower. Entrenched in tunnels and bunkers, they believed themselves safe, but the roar of the M2-2 and Zippo tanks brought an invisible fear that shattered their Bushido discipline. Captured diaries and survivor testimonies describe the American hell that drove them to the brink of insanity, with many choosing suicide over being burned alive. This chapter explores the psychological impact of the flamethrower, a weapon that burned not only bodies but the will of an army once thought unbreakable. On Iwo Jima, the Japanese lived in 1,500 tunnels, some 30 meters deep. M2-2 fire, fired at 20 meters, invaded these shelters, consuming oxygen. One Japanese soldier wrote, "The roar of the fire is the end of the world." In a single day, 200 enemies emerged from a cave, surrendering after a flamethrower attack. This terror, amplified by the heat and smoke, broke their resistance. This chapter captures that panic, a sign of the power of fire. In Okinawa, the fear was even greater. Zippo tanks, with napalm burning at 1,200 degrees Celsius, incinerated entire tunnels. The trapped Japanese used wet towels, but the napalm stuck to their skin. A Japanese officer writes, "The fire haunts us like a cruel god." In Shuri, 500 soldiers committed suicide with grenades after a flamethrower attack. This chapter explores this desperation, a contrast to the initial Japanese confidence. The flamethrower became a symbol of terror. On Peleliu, the Japanese called the M2-2 the American Devil. The soldiers, trained for hand-to-hand combat, could not fight fire. One survivor writes, "The roar burns the mind before the body." This perception, amplified by the screams of those burned, shattered Japanese morale. This chapter captures that rupture, a weapon that conquered the spirit. The Marines, aware of the impact, used the flamethrower strategically. On Iwo Jima, they fired short bursts to maximize fear. One Marine recounts, "The sound was enough to make them run." This tactic, combined with napalm, forced mass surrenders. On Okinawa, 1,000 Japanese surrendered after a Zippo tank attack. This chapter honors that strategy, a key psychological factor. The Japanese tried to adapt, digging deeper tunnels. But napalm, with its sticky fire, reached them. On Peleliu, a 50-meter bunker was incinerated, killing 40 enemy personnel. A Japanese officer writes, "There is no shelter from the fire." This helplessness, in the face of the M2-2, broke their discipline. This chapter explores that desperation, a sign of Japanese decline. Flamethrower operators were tragic heroes. On Okinawa, 150 died, shot by snipers. With napalm tanks on their backs, they risked everything. One Marine writes, "We carried hell for our brothers." This sacrifice, under constant fire, amplified Japanese terror. This chapter honors their courage, a testament to bravery. Allied logistics ensured the fire. On Iwo Jima, 50 ships carried 20,000 gallons of napalm. Workshops reloaded M2-2s in hours. A logistics officer writes, "We kept the hell alive." This network, in contrast to Japanese shortages, ensured the psychological impact. This chapter celebrates that effort. The Japanese, confident in their bunkers, underestimated the fire. On Okinawa, they lost 5,000 men to flamethrowers. One soldier writes, "The fire betrayed us." This blindness, born of faith in their defenses, left them vulnerable. This chapter explores that arrogance, a prelude to collapse. The Marines used fear tactically. On Peleliu, they fired flamethrowers at dawn, maximizing panic. One officer writes, "The fire at dawn was a message." This strategy, combined with the roar of the M2-2, forced the Japanese to flee. This chapter honors that tactical innovation. Japanese morale collapsed. On Iwo Jima, soldiers, facing flames, abandoned positions. One survivor writes, "Fire burns the soul." This terror, amplified by napalm, led to mass surrenders. This chapter captures that breakdown, a sign of the flamethrowers' power. Zippo tanks were devastating. On Okinawa, they destroyed 1,000 bunkers, forcing 2,000 enemies to surrender. One Marine writes, "The tank was a fire god." This lethality, combined with mobility, surprised the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that technology. The Japanese tried using water, but the napalm kept burning. On Iwo Jima, 2,000 died in tunnels. One officer writes, "There is no escape." This chapter explores that helplessness, a contrast to Allied innovation. The Marines' morale grew. Seeing enemies surrender gave them confidence. On Okinawa, a platoon used M2-2s to capture a hill, earning medals. One Marine writes, "Fire was our strength." This chapter celebrates that spark. Operators innovated under pressure. On Iwo Jima, they used short bursts to conserve napalm. One operator writes, "We controlled hell." This creativity maximized Japanese terror. This chapter honors that courage. Napalm logistics were key. In 1945, 100 ships carried 50,000 gallons to Okinawa. One sailor writes, "We carried hell." This network ensured the psychological impact. This chapter celebrates that effort. The Japanese, in their diaries, described the flamethrower as a demon. In Okinawa, 5,000 died from the fire. One soldier writes, "The roar is the end." This chapter captures that terror, a weapon that broke the will. Collaboration between Marines and engineers was vital. In 1944, 200 instructors trained 2,000 operators. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to the fire." This synergy ensured the flamethrowers' impact. This chapter celebrates that unity. The flamethrowers' impact was universal. Islanders, seeing burning bunkers, feared the Marines. One native writes, "Fire was a god." This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that left its mark on everyone. Chapter 4. The Science of Fear. Behind the terror that paralyzed Japanese soldiers in the Pacific was American science. The M2-2, M9, and M9A1 flamethrowers, weapons precision engineered to unleash hell. In laboratories in Hawaii and California, Army Chemical Corps engineers perfected napalm mixtures, high-pressure nozzles, and durable tanks, creating a weapon that burned at 1,200 degrees Celsius and reached 40 meters. This chapter takes you to the workshops where the fire was born, a testament to the ingenuity that left the Japanese defenseless against the engineering of fear. The M2-2, introduced in 1942, was the first. With two 4-gallon gasoline tanks and one compressed nitrogen tank, it fired fire for 9 seconds. In tests at Camp Pendleton, it incinerated targets at 20 meters. One engineer recounts, "We designed a portable dragon. This design, though heavy at 70 pounds, was lethal against bunkers." This chapter captures that innovation, a leap that changed the Pacific. Napalm, developed in 1943, was a breakthrough. By mixing gasoline with aluminum gel, it created a sticky fire that adhered to any surface. In tests in Hawaii, napalm burned wood at 1,200 degrees Celsius in seconds. One chemist writes, "Napalm was the soul of the flamethrower." This mixture, combined with M2-2, incinerated Japanese fortifications. This chapter celebrates that chemistry, a pillar of terror. The M9, introduced in 1944, was lighter. At 50 pounds and with a range of 30 meters, it improved mobility. On Peleliu, an M9 incinerated a bunker in 5 seconds. One engineer writes, "We fired faster." This improvement, the result of exhaustive testing, increased the Marines' lethality. This chapter honors that advancement, a key factor. The M9A1, used in Okinawa, was the pinnacle. With a larger napalm tank, it fired for 15 seconds. In tests in California, it reached 40 meters. One operator recounts, "The M9A1 was a fire god." This evolution, combined with mass production, ensured the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that perfection, a testament to ingenuity. Zippo tanks, M4 Shermans with flamethrowers, were devastating. With 400 gallons of napalm, they burned areas of 100 meters. On Iwo Jima, a Zippo tank destroyed 10 bunkers in one day. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to hell." This innovation, adapting tanks, surprised the Japanese. This chapter honors that technology, a tactical shift. The training was rigorous. In Hawaii, 2,000 Marines practiced with M2-2S and M9S, learning to fire under fire. One instructor recounts, "We taught them to control chaos." This discipline, combined with science, maximized the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that preparation, a pillar of victory. Napalm logistics was a triumph. In 1944, 100 ships delivered 50,000 gallons to Iwo Jima. Workshops reloaded M2-2S in hours. A logistics officer writes, "We kept the fire going." This network, in contrast to Japanese shortages, ensured constant use. This chapter honors that logistical effort. The Japanese underestimated the flamethrower. Their bunkers, designed to withstand bullets, were vulnerable to napalm. On Okinawa, they lost 5,000 men to fire. One soldier writes, "The fire betrayed us." This blindness left them defenseless. This chapter explores that arrogance, a prelude to collapse. Engineers innovated under pressure. In 1944, they improved the M9's muzzle, increasing its range. One chemist writes, "Every improvement was a blow to the enemy." This creativity, in laboratories under strict deadlines, maximized terror. This chapter honors that dedication. The Marines used the flamethrower tactically. On Peleliu, they fired at dawn, maximizing fear. One officer writes, "The fire at dawn was a message." This strategy, combined with napalm, forced surrenders. This chapter celebrates that tactic. The psychological impact was devastating. On Iwo Jima, the trapped Japanese committed suicide after seeing the fire. One officer writes, "The roar sears the mind." This terror, amplified by napalm, shattered Japanese morale. This chapter captures that rupture. Zippo tanks were unstoppable. In Okinawa, they destroyed 1,000 bunkers. One Marine writes, "The tank was a god." This lethality, combined with mobility, surprised the Japanese. This chapter celebrates that technology. The Japanese tried using water, but the napalm kept burning. On Iwo Jima, 2,000 died in tunnels. One officer writes, "There is no escape." This chapter explores that helplessness, a contrast to Allied innovation. The Marines' morale grew. Seeing burning bunkers gave them confidence. On Okinawa, a platoon captured a hill with M9s, earning medals. One Marine writes, "Fire was our strength." This chapter celebrates that spark. Operators innovated under pressure. On Iwo Jima, they used short bursts to conserve napalm. One operator writes, "We controlled hell." This creativity maximized the impact. This chapter honors that courage. Napalm logistics were key. In 1945, 100 ships carried 50,000 gallons to Okinawa. One sailor writes, "We carried hell." This netting secured the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that effort. Collaboration between engineers and Marines was vital. In 1944, 200 instructors trained 2,000 operators. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to the fire." This synergy ensured impact. This chapter celebrates that unity. The flamethrower's impact was universal. Islanders, seeing burning bunkers, feared the Marines. One native writes, "Fire was a god." This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that left its mark on everyone. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Fire. The American flamethrower didn't just burn bunkers in the Pacific. It marked a legacy of fire that resonated in the hearts of those who used and faced it. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, M2-2, M9, and Zippo tanks incinerated Japanese fortifications, forcing surrenders, but also left scars on the Marines and enemy soldiers who survived. This chapter reflects on the human cost of the flamethrower, a weapon that won battles but seared the spirits of those who lived through its hell, becoming a symbol of the brutality and resilience of war. On Iwo Jima, flamethrowers destroyed 1,500 bunkers, killing 10,000 Japanese. On Okinawa, Zippo tanks incinerated 2,000 fortifications, forcing 5,000 enemies to surrender. But each shot left a mark. One Marine writes, "The fire still burns in my dreams." The operators, facing snipers, carried 70 pounds of napalm, knowing they could die. This chapter honors their sacrifice, a testament to bravery in hell. The Japanese, trapped in tunnels, faced unimaginable terror. On Peleliu, 2,000 died by fire, many choosing suicide. One survivor writes, "The roar of the fire was the end of the world." This fear, recorded in captured diaries, shattered Bushido discipline, leaving psychological scars. This chapter captures that tragedy. a contrast to the initial Japanese confidence. The flamethrower changed warfare. In 1945, 30% of Japanese fortifications fell to fire. One officer writes, "Napalm was our hammer." This lethality, combined with the mobility of Zippo tanks, ensured Allied advances. But the cost was high. 200 operators died on Okinawa. This chapter reflects on that duality, a weapon that won battles, but at a human price. After the war, the flamethrower left its mark on veterans. In the 1950s, Marines visited museums, viewing M2-2S in display cases. One veteran recounts, "I can't forget the roar." Japanese survivors in their memoirs describe nightmares of fire. This burden, shared by both sides, humanizes the war. This chapter honors those memories, an echo of the cost of fire. The technological legacy endures. Napalm inspired modern weapons, such as the M202A1 flamethrower. In the 1960s, the Army used napalm in Vietnam, inheriting the M2-2. One engineer writes, "The fire of 1944 still burns." This chapter celebrates that heritage, a testament to the science that changed warfare. Civilians on the islands, liberated by Marines, viewed the flamethrower with fear and respect. In Okinawa, one islander writes, "Fire was an American god." This perception, combined with the devastation, marked entire communities. This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that left its mark on everyone. Flamethrower operators were tragic heroes. On Iwo Jima, 100 died, saving platoons. One Marine writes, "We carried hell for our brothers." This sacrifice, under constant fire, ensured victories. This chapter honors their courage, a pillar of victory. Allied logistics were a triumph. In 1945, 100 ships carried 50,000 gallons of napalm to Okinawa. One sailor writes, "We carried hell." This net, in contrast to Japanese shortages, ensured the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that effort. The Japanese underestimated fire. On Okinawa, they lost 5,000 men to flamethrowers. One soldier writes, "The fire betrayed us." This blindness left them defenseless. This chapter explores that arrogance, a prelude to collapse. The Marines used fire tactically. On Peleliu, they fired at dawn, maximizing fear. One officer writes, "The fire at dawn was a message." This strategy forced surrenders. This chapter honors that tactic. The Marines' morale grew. Seeing burning bunkers gave them confidence. On Okinawa, a platoon captured a hill with M9s, earning medals. One Marine writes, "Fire was our strength." This chapter celebrates that spark. The Japanese, in their diaries, described the flamethrower as a demon. In Okinawa, 5,000 died from the fire. One soldier writes, "The roar is the end." This chapter captures that terror, a weapon that broke the will. Operators innovated under pressure. On Iwo Jima, they used short bursts to conserve napalm. One operator writes, "We controlled hell." This creativity maximized the impact. This chapter honors that courage. Collaboration between engineers and Marines was vital. In 1944, 200 instructors trained 2,000 operators. One engineer writes, "We gave wings to the fire." This synergy ensured impact. This chapter celebrates that unity. Napalm logistics were key. In 1945, 100 ships carried 50,000 gallons to Okinawa. One sailor writes, "We carried hell." This netting secured the flamethrower's impact. This chapter celebrates that effort. The flamethrower's impact was universal. Islanders, seeing burning bunkers, feared the Marines. One native writes, fire was a god. This chapter captures that resonance, a weapon that left its mark on everyone. Veterans in the 1950s reflected on fire. One Marine writes, "The flamethrower won the war, but it burned us all." This duality between victory and trauma defines the legacy. This chapter reflects on that truth. The Pacific War, marked by fire, left lessons. The flamethrower showed that technology could break through any defense, but also the spirit. A historian writes, "Fire burns not only the earth, but also the soul." This chapter honors that lesson. In the burning jungles of the Pacific between 1942 and 1945, the American flamethrower, from the M2-2 to the feared Zippo tanks, unleashed an inferno that changed the war. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, the flames not only incinerated Japanese bunkers, but also the morale of an enemy that believed in its invincibility. This audiobook has traveled to those battlefields, where the roar of napalm illuminated the jungle and seared terror into the hearts of Japanese soldiers. But this story is not just about fire. It is about men, about sacrifice, about a world transformed by courage and pain. The impact of the flamethrower was devastating. On Iwo Jima, 1,500 bunkers fell under fire, and on Okinawa, 5,000 Japanese soldiers perished in tunnels consumed by napalm. Each burst, fired at 1,200 degrees Celsius, was a blow to Bushido pride, forcing surrenders or desperate sacrifices. One Japanese survivor wrote, "The fire stole our souls." But behind every flame was a Marine, carrying 70 pounds of death, risking everything for his brothers. This final chapter mourns the fallen on both sides, but celebrates the courage that ignited the Allied victory. The psychological toll was immense. For the Japanese, entrenched in caves, the roar of the flamethrower was the end of the world. Captured diaries reveal their despair. There is no shelter, only the fire. Many chose death rather than face the flames. For the Marines, each shot weighed heavily on their souls. One M2-2 operator confessed years later, "I see the flames in my dreams." This audiobook captures their voices, an echo of humanity amid the brutality, a reminder that war burns more than flesh. The Marines who carried the fire were tragic heroes. On Okinawa, 200 operators died, shot by snipers while saving platoons. Their names, etched on medals and gravestones, resonate in the hearts of their families. The engineers in Hawaii, mixing napalm in laboratories, and the sailors, transporting 50,000 gallons across the Pacific, forged that hell with sweat and hope. Civilians on the islands, watching their homes burn, carried the weight of war. This chapter embraces their sacrifices, a tapestry of courage that lit the path to peace. The legacy of the flamethrower transcends the Pacific. Its technology, from the M2-2 to napalm, inspired modern weapons, but also left scars. In museums, flamethrowers rest as relics, their silent nozzles telling stories of valor and horror. One veteran, looking at an M9 in 1950, wrote, "Fire won the war, but it burned us all." This audiobook honors that duality, a weapon that liberated islands but scarred souls, reminding us that victory always comes at a cost. This story doesn't belong only to the victors. The Japanese soldiers, fighting to the bitter end in dark bunkers, displayed a bravery that deserves respect. Their diaries, filled with promises to distant families, remind us of their humanity. The Marines, leaving wives and children behind, carried the fire with the weight of duty. The islanders, caught between the war, dreamed of peace. This audiobook weaves their stories together, a mosaic of loss and redemption that resonates in every burned-out cave, in every Pacific wave that caresses silent shores. As the sun rises over the islands where the fire raged, we honor all who lived this story. The Japanese, whose resistance vanished in flames, the Marines, whose hearts burned with valor, and the civilians, who rebuilt their lives on the ashes. The flamethrower, an echo of fire and steel, didn't just destroy fortifications. It illuminated human resilience. Subscribe, ring the bell, and carry with you this tale of sacrifice and hope, a whisper of flames calling us to build a world where fire is only light, never destruction.